I don't think that there's a perfect aiming style. You have the fast and flicky aimers like Tens, Zekin, Forsaken, Demon 1, Jing, and something. And you have the smooth and controlled calm aimers like Alexander, Sugetsu, Aspas, Les, Ye, Cryocells. But what do they all have in common? They are top tier players and top tier aimers. My initial thought when I was looking into this is this a sensitivity thing? For example, if I'm playing on high sensitivity, does that make me a fast and flicky aimer? Or if I'm on low sensitivity, does that make me a smooth and controlled calm aimer? And then I started to look at these pros and what their settings were and their sensitivity was. And I do believe that there are some correlations, right? Like typically your high sense players are the more fast and flicky ones, and typically your low sensitivity players are your more calm aimers. That is not always the case. Demon 1, who plays really low sensitivity, tends to insta-flick and get headshots. And you have Aspas, who is playing at 800.4, a relatively high sensitivity in Valorant, and he's really smooth and he's very controlled in his aim. Okay, so what does that really mean for you guys? It means that you have to pick a shooting style and an aiming style that you want to perfect. If you really like to be fast and flicky, then maybe you should practice with really explosive flicks and then trying to increase your precision with that. If you're really into the smooth and controlled, calm aiming style, then that's what you should be practicing and perfecting. You might enjoy some target switching scenarios, maybe some tracking, some micro flicks. You guys have probably heard of this quote, but I'm going to say it for you guys again. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times, from Bruce Lee. So why does this matter? Number one, Valorant isn't an aim trainer, right? It's not a game where you have to have holistic aim. If you're just really good at your style of aiming in whatever category that is, then you can be really good at getting kills in Valorant. What I mean by this is a game like Quake or Overwatch, or if you're an aim trainer main, you have to be really well balanced in all of the different categories to actually be a really good aimer and a really good player. But because Valorant is attack FPS and the time to kill is relatively low, no matter what your technique is, as long as you reach like the speed threshold of getting the kill in a certain time frame, then you're good to go. To nail down this point further, I like to use hard bots as a threshold here. And to quickly preface, hard bots is something that you shouldn't exactly be training, but it's good to benchmark yourself. So first, let's take a look at Tens doing hard bots. So in this clip, Tens has a really fast initial flick, and then he confirms with his micro adjust. Then if we look at Forsaken, he has a very quick flick as well, but he doesn't have that micro adjust time. He just goes for a really quick burst / spray, and then he gets the headshot. Then we have this run here with Sheriff only. And what we notice is he doesn't have that hard initial flick at all. If anything, he's kind of doing like a smooth, controlled line over, almost like he's tracking. So the conclusion that I've made here is that no matter your aiming style, as long as you can kill the hard bots in that time frame before he disappears, it is viable and it is good enough. Then it's more so about working on your aiming style so that you can get a little bit more consistent and then perfect it from there. Now you might be wondering, Dopai, should I not train my weaknesses at all? Okay, so that's not what I'm saying. I think if you look at the Voltaic benchmarks, a majority of you guys are going to have better flicking than you will tracking. You should indeed train your tracking or whatever category you're weakest at. But I don't want you to change the way you shoot in game. I just want you to use the techniques that you've learned from these other categories to make your technique better. For example, if you really like to go for initial fast flicks and not really go for that micro adjust, then you might want to train your spray so you can rely on your spray. But if you train these other categories as well, then you might get a different lens and then eventually upgrade your shooting style to potentially have micro adjust in certain scenarios. But on top of that, if you really do like to go for that initial flick and not really go for that micro adjustment, like that's your style, then I would highly recommend you look at the video that Matty OW did when he was working with a liege. What they did is that they were working on increasing his accuracy on that initial flick, but not really the static technique of, initial flick into micro. So in other words, they were still training his strengths, his really fast initial flick, trying to make it a little bit better while still addressing some of his weaknesses in other categories. Okay, so to move on to something that I thought was really interesting is actually how these players reset their mouse on their mouse pad. I think everyone has kind of like their comfort zone on a pad, right? Like typically for most players, that's going to be towards the center of the pad. And some players take this to the extreme, and then some people work on trying to increase comfort on all of your mouse pad. So I want to show you guys this clip from Zekin that I saw on his Twitter. And I want you to pay attention to just his mouse cam. What you'll notice is that his forearm in particular doesn't really move. And what I mean by that is like not actually sliding across the mouse pad. It's kind of just stuck there. And he will pick up and reset his mouse a ton throughout this clip. And it's sometimes in areas where you wouldn't expect it, like when he's pushing Gen. Now, in theory, I would be like, well, that's just not efficient. Like, what if he's like getting caught in transition when he's moving his mouse? As you can see, in practice, that's not the case at all. He's not getting caught off guard and he's still able to get the kill really quickly. I think in this case, Zekin has, number one, mastered the skill of resetting his mouse, and number two, being really deadly in his comfort range. Then you have other players that you would imagine with the smooth and controlled aiming style, you can't do that, right? Because like you have to be smooth and controlled as you're moving around. Alexander even said in his warm-up / aim training video years ago at this point that he would play deathmatch specifically not to pick up his mouse and trying to utilize the entire mouse pad.
When I load up into DM, I have personal goals in mind that I like to work on. My personal goal when I aim train is to work on being confident on all edges of my mouse pad and taking my time when aiming.
And you can't really say one is better than the other when both of these players are top tier. And again, I want to bring up, this is Valorant, right? You can get away with maybe potentially less suboptimal aiming styles like Zekin has done here and still be incredibly lethal in the game. There's downtime, there's room to reset, there's room to go for these flicks. It's just like, we don't need to get into the realm of overthinking. We just need to train and get better. That's really all it is. You need to get better at your aiming style and then go from there. So how do you actually improve your aim? Like, how do you get good aim? Well, first things first, I would highly recommend you do the Valorant Voltaic benchmarks to kind of see where you are in each category. I've talked about this a bunch on other videos, but basically you just go to app.voltaic.gg, put in your aim labs name, click Valorant at the top, and then just run through the playlist. Start with your novices, and then move on once you got gold complete, and then immortal complete, and so on and so forth. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there's 4 ways that you actually aim. You have your fingers, you have your wrist, you have your arm, and you have your shoulders. Some players only aim with their fingers and their wrist. Some players only aim with their arm and their wrist. Some people don't use their shoulder at all. I think for the majority of you guys that say, I only wrist aim, or I only want to arm aim, to be honest, that's likely a skill issue. I used to mainly aim with my arm because I was playing on a lower sensitivity, and that caused me to have a lot of precision issues with my aim, specifically long range targets. I couldn't really micro adjust because I was using my arm for all of these motions. So what helped me to think about is using my arm for big swipes and big motions, my wrist for more precise aiming, and then my fingers for really, really tiny micro adjustments. And the finger motion is honestly subconscious. I don't think about it. It kind of just happens and I watch it back on my mouse cam. So when we go back and look at the second clip, for example, you can see he's just resetting constantly because he's really good at his wrist aiming. But when he needs to go for a bigger swipe or a bigger motion, he quickly swipes with his arm, resets back, and then starts doing his wrist aim again. So I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but we were talking about the Voltaic Valorant benchmarks. You could technically use the benchmarks as your routine and just train from there. However, it is better to kind of make a personalized routine for yourself. I'm going to provide the initial aim document breakdown that I had from Minigod during my time aim coaching with him. And then that will get you into the mindset of what a personalized routine might look like and then how you can craft yourself one. If you don't want to go through all that, then the benchmarks are completely fine, at least you're doing something. I also recommend the ramp routine by Minigod as a warm-up. And if you want a routine that you do after your games, more like a training routine, then I will point you in the direction of the Voltaic Valorant routines as well. And then I want to clear something up. You know, there's people that don't want to aim train at all, and then there's people that only want to aim train and don't want to do in-game stuff. If you want to be a really good Valorant player, you need to do both, in my opinion. Can you get away with just doing one? Kind of. But if you want to be efficient, and ideally that's why you're watching this video, you will do both. So after you've done your aim training, like as your warm-up, or if you're only doing it after, I'll talk about some in-game stuff that you can do. So we already talked about hard bots. I would benchmark yourself here, maybe to warm up. You can do eliminate 100. You can kind of just spawn the bots and shoot them. I've talked about range drills before. You know, they're useful, but I don't really want to structure you guys into one specific drill. After you do your range routine or whatever you do in there, highly recommend you guys hop into deathmatch because that'll help with your crosshair placement and your movement, which is arguably a more important skill than raw aim in Valorant anyways. And then feel free to hop over into TDM if you want a little bit more of like, you know, gun usage, like you get to use the pistols, you get to use the bulldog, and more importantly, you can practice your multi-frags because you're on the same team fighting against an enemy team. So you can, you know, get back-to-back kills, and that's something that deathmatch doesn't help with. The important thing here is when you're practicing, you're having deliberate practice. So if you're working on your flicks, you're working on your flicks. If you're working on your hit confirmation, you're working on your hit confirmation. That's really the main thing of what you're trying to focus on when you're practicing. Okay, so hopefully that kind of clears up the whole conversation about what does good aim really look like. This is something that I explored for myself for a long time and I was really conflicted. We just got to get to work and get better. That's as simple as it is. Speaking of getting better, if you're a Plat 3 to Diamond 3 player and you're a Duelist main, I am hosting a Duelist bootcamp on July 15th. Check out my Discord for more information. I appreciate all of your support, and I'll see you guys next time.